What social ideas did the following people support? Ram Mohan Rai, Dayanand Saraswati, Veer Salingam Pantulu, Jyotirao Phule, Pandita Ramabai, Periyar, Mumtaz Ali, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. These people supported the following ideas: spread of education among women, Ram Mohan Rai; Dayanand Saraswati, widow remarriage; Veerasalingam Pantulu, caste equality and justice; Jyotirao Phule, abolition of child marriage; Pandita Ramabai, social equality for untouchables; Periyar, social equality for untouchables. How did the knowledge of ancient texts help the reformers promote new laws? The reformers tried to convince people that widow burning, caste distinctions, child marriage, etc., had no sanction in ancient texts. Their knowledge of ancient texts gave them immense confidence and moral support, which they utilized in promoting new laws. They did not get feared when people raised voice against the reforms they had brought. What were the different reasons people had for not sending girls to school? People were afraid of the schools that were opened in the mid 19th century. They had their own reasons. They feared that schools would take girls away from home and prevent them from doing their domestic work. As girls had to travel through public places in order to reach school, many people began to feel that this would have a corrupting influence on girls. Several people were of opinion that girls should be away from public spaces. Why were Christian missionaries attacked by many people in the country? Would some people have supported them too? If so, for what reasons? People suspected that Christian missionaries were involved in forced conversion of poor and tribal people from Hinduism to Christianity. In some people had supported them, it must be due to the reason that the poor and the tribal people converted to Christianity would get a golden opportunity to go to school. The school would equip them with some resources to make their way into a changing world. In the British period, what new opportunities opened up for people who came from castes that were regarded as low castes? With the expansion of cities, new demands of labor created. Drains had to be dug, roads laid, buildings constructed, and cities cleaned. This required coolies, diggers, carriers, bricklayers, sweepers, rickshaw pullers, etc. This labor force came from people belonging to low caste. They left their villages and small towns and shifted to the cities to get work. Some went to work in plantations in Assam, Mauritius, Trinidad, and Indonesia. Although it was not easy to work in the new locations, poor people saw this as opportunity to get away from the exploitation of the upper caste. How did Jyoti Rao, the reformer, justify their criticism of caste inequality in society? Jyotirao Phule attacked Brahmins, claimed that they were superior to others because they were Aryans. Phule argued that the Aryans were outsiders. They came from outside the subcontinent and defeated and subjugated the true children of the country, those who had lived here from before the coming of the Aryans. These Aryans established their dominance and began looking at the defeated population as low caste people. Phule opined that upper caste had no right to their land and power. The land, in fact, belonged to the natives who were considered as low caste people. Why did Phule dedicate his book Gulamgiri to the American movement to free slaves? Jyotirao Phule wrote a book in 1873. He named the book Gulamgiri, meaning slavery. Some 10 years before this, the American Civil War had been fought, leading to the end of slavery in America. Fuller dedicated his book to all those Americans who had fought to free slaves. He did this in order to establish a link between the conditions of the lower caste in India and the black slaves in America. What did Dr. Ambedkar want to achieve through the temple entry movement? Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar led three temple entry movements between 1927 and 1935. His sole purpose behind these movements was to make people see the power of caste prejudice within society. Why were Jyotirao Phule and Ramaswamy Naikar critical of the national movement? Did their criticism help the national struggle in any way? They were critical of the national movement because the nationalists often made sitting arrangements following caste distinctions at feasts. The lower castes were made to sit at a distance from the upper castes. The criticism helped the national struggle to a great extent. Ramaswamy Naikar inspired the untouchables to fight for their dignity by initiating the self respect movement. The Brahmo Samaj was founded by Raja Ram Mohan Rai. A widow home was established at Pune by Pandita Ramabai. Peasants and artisans were referred to as Shudras. Periyar founded the self-respect movement. The Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College was opened by Sayyid Ahmad Khan. Why are social reformers described so? Social reformers are described so because they felt that some changes were essential in society and unjust practices needed to be rooted out. How did reformers bring changes in society? They brought changes in society by persuading people to give up old practices and adopt a new way of life. What do you mean by sati? Widows who choose death by burning themselves on the funeral pyre of their husbands are known as sati, meaning virtuous women, who were known as Vaishyas. Traders and moneylenders were known as Vaishyas. What was Hook Swinging Festival? It was a popular festival in which devotees underwent a peculiar form of suffering as part of ritual worship. With hooks pierced through their skin, they swung themselves on a wheel. Who was Mumtaz Ali? Mumtaz Ali was a social reformer who reinterpreted verses from Quran to argue for the education of women. What do you know about Tarabai Shinde? Tarabai Shinde was a woman who got education at home at Pune. She is better known for publishing a book called Stri Purush Tulna. What is the book Stri Purush Tulna about? It is about the social differences between men and women. How did Widows' Home at Pune help the widows? It trained them so that they could manage financial support for themselves. What was the contribution of Christian missionaries in spreading education among the tribal groups and lower castes? Set up schools for tribal groups and lower caste children. Here they were equipped with some skills to make their way into a new world. Why do people view leather workers with contempt? Leather workers work with dead animals, which are seen as dirty and polluting, hence, people see them with contempt. Who were Madigas? Madigas were experts at cleaning hides, tanning them for using, and sewing sandals. Who were Shudras? Shudras belonged to laboring castes. Who were Atishudras? Atishudras were untouchables. What was the Satyashodhak Samaj and who founded it? The Satyashodhak Samaj was an association that propagated caste equality. It was founded by Jyotirao Phule. Name the Hindu scriptures which were criticized by Periyar. The codes of Manu, the ancient lawgiver, and the Bhagavad Gita and the Ramayana. Why were untouchable students not allowed to enter the classroom where upper caste boys were taught? There was a false notion that upper caste, that untouchables would pollute the rooms where their children were taught, and that's why they were made to sit outside the classroom. Who was Swami Ramakrishna? Swami Ramakrishna was a priest and a saint. He was another major socio religious reformer of the 19th century. Give New York Herald report on Swami Vivekananda's speech in the World Parliament of Religions at Chicago in 1893. The New York Herald reported, "We feel how foolish it is to send missionaries to this learned nation." Why did E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar leave the Congress? E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar left the Congress because he found nationalists adhering to caste distinctions. At a feast organized by them, the lower caste were made to sit at a distance from upper castes. Who was Raja Ram Mohan Rai? Raja Ram Mohan Rai was a learned social reformer. He was well versed in Sanskrit, Persian, and several other Indian European languages. He raised voice against the practice of sati and got it rooted out. What did Raja Ram Mohan Rai do to end the practice of sati? Raja Ram Mohan Rai moved to see the tyranny of old practices that were deeply rooted in the Indian society. Burning of widows on the funeral pyre of their husbands was one such old practice which Ram Mohan Rai felt needed to be rooted out immediately. He began a campaign against this. As he had deep knowledge of Sanskrit, Persian, and several other Indian and European languages, he tried to show through the writings that the practice of sati had no sanction in ancient text. He got support from the British officials who had also begun to criticize Indian traditions and customs by the early 19th century. Finally, in 1829, the practice of sati was banned. Who was Swami Vivekanand? When did he establish the Ramakrishna mission? Swami Vivekanand was a disciple of Ramakrishna Paramhans. His original name was Narendranath Dutt. At the age of 18, he met Swami Ramakrishna. This meeting completely transformed him. Later, he established the Ramakrishna mission on 1st May 1897 at Belur Mutt, Calcutta. Give the basic ideals of Ramakrishna mission. The Ramakrishna mission stressed the ideal of salvation through social service and selfless action. The ideals of the Ramakrishna mission are salvation through social service and selfless action. All religions are equal, they are just different paths to reach the same God. The service of man is true service of God. Superstitions, untouchability, and caste system should be removed. What was the reason for criticism of caste prejudice by Dr. Ambedkar? Dr. Ambedkar belonged to Mahar family. As a child, he experienced what caste prejudice meant in everyday life. He remembered how he was forced to sit outside the classroom on the ground and not allowed to drink water from taps meant for upper caste children. These systems were very depressing. In 1927, he started a temple entry movement which was resented by the Brahman priests. Give an account of movement that spread in different parts of the country in favor of widow remarriage. Did the movement get success? The movement in favor of widow remarriage spread in different parts of the country by the second half of the 19th century. Veerasalingam Pantalu formed an association for widow remarriage in the Telugu-speaking areas of the Madras Presidency. Around the same time, young intellectuals and reformers in Bombay pledged themselves to work for the same cause. In the north, the founder of the Arya Samaj, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, also supported widow remarriage. However, the movement did not get much success. The number of widows who actually remarried remained low. Those who remarried were not easily accepted in the society. The conservative people never approved the new law. Give a brief description of the movements that were organized by people from within the lower caste against caste discrimination. By the second half of the 19th century, people from within the lower caste began to raise voice against caste discrimination. They organized movements against this practice and demanded social equality and justice. The Satnami movement became famous in central India. It was initiated by Ghasidas, who came from a low caste, worked among the leather workers, and organized a movement to improve their social status. In eastern Bengal, Haridas Thakur's Matua sect worked among low caste Chandala cultivators. Haridas questioned the Brahminical text that supported the caste discrimination. Sri Narayan Guru belonged to Ezavas, a low caste in present day Kerala. He proclaimed the ideals unity of all within one sect, a single caste, and one God. By organizing these movements, the leaders coming from low caste tried to create awareness amongst the lower castes. Who was E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar? What did he do to improve the condition of the untouchables? E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, popularly known as Periyar, belonged to a middle class family. He had been an ascetic in his early life and had studied Sanskrit scriptures carefully. Afterwards, he became a member of the Congress but quit it when he found that at a feast organized by nationalists, seating arrangements followed caste discrimination. That is, the lower caste were made to sit at a distance from the upper caste. Then he founded self-respect movement which inspired untouchables to fight for their dignity. He argued that untouchables were the true upholders of an original Tamil and Dravidian culture which had been subjugated by Brahmins. He felt that all religious authorities saw social divisions and inequality as God given. Untouchables had to free themselves from all religions to achieve equal social status. Discuss the philosophy of Swami Vivekananda and his contribution in society. When Swami Ramakrishna passed away in August 1886, his disciple Vivekananda combined simple teachings of his guru with his well founded modern outlook and spread them all over the world. In the World Parliament of Religions at Chicago in 1893, he explained the true wisdom of the Hindu religion and culture and won the heart of everyone sitting there. Indeed, Swami Vivekananda was the first Indian in modern times who re established the spiritual prominence of the Vedanta philosophy on a global scale. But his mission was not simply to talk of religion. He was extremely pained at, at the poverty and the misery of his countrymen. He firmly believed that any reform could become successful only by uplifting the condition of the masses. Therefore, his call to the people of India was to rise above the narrow confines of their religion and come together in the service of the nation. By sending out this call, he made a signal contribution to the nascent nationalism in India. However, his sense of nationalism was not narrow in its conception. He was convinced that many of the problems facing the mankind could only be overcome if the nations of the world come together on an equal footing. Therefore, his exhortation to the youth was to unite on the basis of a common spiritual heritage. In this exhortation, he became truly the symbol of a new spirit and a source of strength for the future. Why were changes necessary in Indian society? Indian society had been a prey to many evil practices for a long time. Men and women were treated differently. Women were subjected to many restrictions. They were not allowed to go to schools. They were not allowed to choose their husbands. Child marriage was an established custom in the society. Most children were married off at an early age. Both Hindu and Muslim men could marry more than one wife. In some parts of the country, sati was in practice. Those widows were praised who chose death by burning themselves on the funeral pyre of their husbands. Women's rights to property were also restricted. One more evil practice that had crippled Indian society was that all people did not enjoy equal status. The upper caste considered which consisted of Brahmins and Kshatriyas, availed all privileges, but other than these, people were subjected to exploitation. The untouchables who did menial work were considered polluting. They were not allowed to enter temples or draw water from well used by upper caste. They were seen as inferior human beings. These evil customs and practices had eclipsed the progress of society. Hence, debates and discussions began to take place from the early 19th century with the development of new forms of communications. For the first time, books, newspapers, magazines, leaflets, and pamphlets were printed. They spread awareness among the common masses. Social reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar came forward and took initiatives to bring changes in society by abolishing the evil practices one after the other. How did women involve themselves in their upliftment? By the end of 19th century, Indian women themselves began to work for their upliftment. They began to get higher education in universities. Some of them trained to be doctors, some became teachers. Many women began to write and publish their critical views on status of women in society. The name of Tarabai Shinde is worth mentioning here. She got education at home at Pune. She published a book, Stri Purush Tulna, meaning a comparison between men and women. She criticized the social differences between men and women. Another woman, Pandita Ramabai, was a great scholar of Sanskrit. She criticized Hinduism, which was so oppressive towards women. She wrote a book about the miserable lives of upper caste Hindu women. She established a widow home at Pune to provide shelter to widows who had been ill treated by their families. From the early 20th century, Muslim women such as Begums of Bhopal and Begum Rokeya Sakhawat Hossain played active role in spreading education among Muslim girls. They founded schools for them. Begum Rokeya Sakhawat Hossain fearlessly criticized the conservative ideas. She argued that religious leaders of every faith accorded an inferior position to women. The Orthodox Hindus and the Muslims got alarmed to see all this. Several Hindu nationalists felt that Hindu women were adopting Western ways, which would corrupt Hindu culture and erode family values. Orthodox Muslims were equally worried about the impact of these changes. Unaware of all these, women from the early 20th century began to form political associations, pressure groups to push through laws for female suffrage and better health care and education for them. Some of them even joined various kinds of nationalist and socialist movements from 1920s.